Hey everyone, welcome to Your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. I'm Beth McCord, your Enneagram Coach. And today is going to be a really fun day because I'm inviting my husband, Jeff McCord, to actually interview me and 3 other moms. Now, this podcast is going to be different because the span of life that us moms are is mainly from teenage into being grandmas. And so the idea is we've been using the Enneagram, all 4 of us, for a really long time. And so what has it been like to be a new mom using the Enneagram all the way into being a grandmother? So just to kind of paint the picture, I started using the Enneagram when Nate and Libby were 1 and 3 years old. So a long time ago, back in 2001. And now they're 23 and 25 years old. And we have a new grandbaby who right now is 4 months old. So I've been using the Enneagram for a really long time in different stages and seasons of my life, but also their life. So I wanted to bring Jeff on to kind of paint the different seasons of life, but also then to ask us questions about those different seasons from our Enneagram perspective. So we have a type 7, a type 8, a type 2, and me, a type 9. Of course, we would love to have all 9 Enneagram types here, but that could take for a very long podcast or only 1 or 2 questions, and that's it. So I invited these moms because I've known they've used the Enneagram for a long time. They're Enneagram coaches with us, so they are really well versed in it. Or Angie, who is one of my dear friends and who started our podcast with us, is super well versed in it. So I wanted to paint that picture for you because a lot of times people think my new book, Enneagram for Moms, which was just released last week, that it's really just for young moms. It is, and it's for really every stage of life. In fact, I would say I'm using the Enneagram just as much, if not more than ever, with our adult children, because now we really have to have those conversations. I want to know, am I understanding you? How can I support you? And how can I see the world through your lens? And am I doing anything that I need to apologize for? And we can have those conversations. So, using the Enneagram and what my book is about is not just for young moms, it's for all moms, young moms, grandmothers, great grandmothers. There's never a better time than where you are right now to start using this tool for enormous clarity to help yourself in your own story, but also to help your relationships. So I brought Jeff in. He's going to really walk us through those different seasons, ask some really great questions, and give us some insights even from, being a pastor for over 20 years and using the Enneagram alongside me. So I'm really excited to have him here to navigate this conversation. So let's just jump right in and listen to the conversation we had today.
Well, thank you all for joining us to talk about motherhood and all of the unique seasons as a woman that you walk through as it relates to your role as mom. And one of the reasons why this is such an important thing is that the Enneagram is not just for young moms. Beth is still finding that the Enneagram is still relevant for her now as a grandma. What's your grandmother name?
Mima,
Meemaw. That's right.
and your papa.
And I'm Papaw. We went with Southern names because we're in Nashville and we were going to be.
We're going to be Mimi and Papa, but then Nate with the grand dogs was kind of joking around like Mima, Papa, and then we were
I
all
think
kind
I
of
was Peepaw for a while.
yeah, we were all kind of laughing about it,
And
and then it
kind of
kind of
stuck.
just stuck. We were like, yeah, it's kind of fun and funny, and so that's who we are.
That's what we were doing yesterday, taking care of Augie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or Gills. That's the other name.
That's his nickname.
That's the private family name,
Yep.
I guess. But Beth and I have been talking about this because the Enneagram has had particular relevance in each season of her story as a mom. And so she asked that I would step in to just ask you all questions because she didn't want to necessarily have to lead the conversation, but rather just participate and be able to comment on it.
Okay, so before we actually dive into Jeff's questions, I want everyone to get to know who you are, when you started using the Enneagram and your kids' ages then, and what ages are they now. So your type, where you're from, and your kind of kiddo ages and stuff like that. So Amy, let's start with you.
Yes, I'm Amy Wicks, and I am currently in Kansas City. I say I'm a type 7, a social 7 with an 8 wing. Though, after lots of conversation, plenty of 6 wings does show up too.
Uh-huh.
But I have 3 kids, and I found out about Enneagram, or really dug into Enneagram about 2016. Now, you're asking me to do a hard math question here on the fly. But I think if I can think really quick, I think that means they were about 10, 9, and 7 or 6. I had 3 kids in 3.5 years. So they're all teenagers now.
Mm,
I've got one leaving the nest. But so they were really little. And I definitely erred on the side then of using it for me.
mm.
And oh man, so grateful that I had the Enneagram when I did, and wished at that point I had had it sooner. But certainly as I'm navigating these really tumultuous teenage years, I'm so glad I have it. It's
Yeah.
been amazing.
Awesome. Ro, what about you?
I'm Elliott. I live in the Nashville area, not far from Beth and Jeff. I have been married for 43 years. I have 5 adult children ranging from 41, she's not going to appreciate that, down to 26. I have 9 grandchildren. So the Enneagram, that's part of a bit of my story, showed up at a very crossroad time for me after my last child left the nest
Mm,
and I was lost. And the Enneagram was so impactful and it helped put me on a different path that I couldn't have imagined being on right now. I am a type 2, and that is part of why I was lost.
mhm,
I put all my eggs in my children's basket, and the thing I learned about eggs is they grow up and they fly away. And that
mhm,
basket was empty, and I was empty.
mm.
So the Enneagram came at a very, very important time in my life. And I can say I wish I would have had it when my kids were younger, but I think we undersell the value of it with adult children.
Right.
When your children get married and
Mhm,
new people show up, these strangers show up to be part of your family. And actually, I know I'm going to be a better grandmother. I'm
mm,
already looking at some of my kids. I think I grandkids can tell some of their numbers a little bit,
mhm.
and I'll interact with them very different than I would have if I didn't know the Enneagram.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks, Ro. And Angie, what about you?
So I am in Orlando, Florida, and I, alongside Beth and Jeff McCord, started Your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. I would just
Yes.
like to
She
say
did.
that.
She's it's her fault.
I remember asking
We've
you,
been in it
Angie,
together.
whatever, I forgot the restaurant that we were at, but I said, "Are you sure we're ready to start a podcast?" You're like, "Yes, Jeff. You're
I
ready to
was just
start."
so surprised that that was even a question in your mind. We were at Saltgrass Steakhouse in Orlando. I
Yes,
totally
Yes.
that's
remember
right.
it.
So
And,
funny. Well,
yeah,
welcome to
and
a
so
sexy world.
I I know, right? Anyway, so I am a podcaster. Podcasting has been kind of what I do really since 2017. And I probably found the Enneagram about a year later when, well, maybe about that same time. I was in counseling and my counselor introduced me to it. And then I actually met Beth and we started doing some coaching back in the day. And that's how we got connected. And then we started the podcast together. But Robert and I have been married for 28 years this year, and we have 3 kids together. So they are 23, 21, and 19 now. So 2 in college, 1 just graduated. So when I first started using the Enneagram, they were all young teenagers, really.
Mhm,
And
yep.
of course, I had that leaning to try to figure out what their types were. But I realized pretty quickly because of working with you, Beth, that it was more important to know who I was
Mm.
than to try to type them. And that has really helped me through the years for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for, being here. And just in case anyone doesn't know who I am, I'm Beth McCord, married to this guy, Jeff, for 29 years. We live just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And then we have 2 kiddos who were on the podcast 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks prior to when this was released. Um, And that's Nate, who's 25, and Libby, who's 23. And Libby is married and has our first grandson, August, who, of course, we adore. um, and we started using the Enneagram back in 2001 when they were 1 and 3 years old. So really, they've been brought up with some form or fashion of the Enneagram, whether they had realized it or not. And so that's kind of a fun conversation that we had of what was it like to really kind of be raised, with Enneagram parents.
And
So
we have confirmed with them. So if there's any publishers listening, they are open to writing the book, the tell-all
the
of the
tell-all
Enneagram, growing up with the Enneagram
with your
Beth.
Enneagram coach. What was it
The
really
expose.
like?
We're waiting for the documentary on Netflix.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a whole thing.
absolutely.
The docuseries, all the gossip.
True crime.
So Jeff, so I wanted you to come on this podcast in particular because, you were mentored by a pastor who had some just really neat insights, just on life in general, being a parent in general, life stages. And so if you could just kind of walk us through those 4 stages and then ask us questions regarding parenting and the Enneagram in those stages, I think that would be really a fun conversation for us to have, but I think it'd be really helpful for our audience as well.
Well, the whole goal of this is just understanding that it's interesting to hear that the Enneagram had specific insight and impact at each season because each season presented certain challenges. So the first season that we want to talk about is that late teenager, early 20-something as a woman trying to figure out who you are as a woman, but separate from your family of origin. Now, the interesting thing about that is that usually what happens is that certain types play certain roles within the family, that those roles are reinforced by the family, and sometimes they might be disliked or sometimes they may be preferred over other types. But so when trying to figure out who you were as a woman, what were the no's? What were the yeses? Who do I want to be that's different from my family? What do I want to stop from happening? Could be dysfunction. So whoever would like to go first, but what was that experience like for you as a young mom? Maybe you didn't know the Enneagram, that's okay, but what were some of the questions that you were asking yourself and some of the thoughts that you had about becoming your own, having your own identity apart from your family?
Oh, and Amy is a type 7, and Ro had said she's a type 2, and Angie is a type 8, and I'm a type 9. So just in case as we go through it. So who would like to start?
Okay, I want to clarify. You've mentioned kind of an age range, but I was 27 when I first became a mom. So there is a little bit of a different experience of those late teen 20s than to becoming mom. So I'm just
so we're not
curious
talking
to know.
We're not talking about motherhood yet, right?
That's right. This is
Okay.
when you as a woman apart from kids.
So I'll kind of
Because that
start.
becomes the thing. Like whenever we do have children, how do you not lose yourself while in the midst of parenting? So
Yeah.
there's still this.
So I'll start. So with my family of origin, the role I played was the peacemaker, the peacekeeper, like just go along to get along. A type 7 father who, like, let's just keep everything positive and let's not deal with the hard things in life. So, if I was struggling, somehow you had to talk about it in a more lighthearted, positive way to actually be heard. And then with my mom being a type 6, then do I really want to share everything? Because then it could become her anxiety. And now I have to caretake that. And so and so I kind of really enmeshed, of course, at being a 9 myself with them and thought that was obviously completely normal because this is all that I knew. So when I was trying to differentiate and know myself, I didn't even know who that was because I went along with what they thought was right. And so I didn't have a foundation to really even have clarity of who I was. And that's why then at age 26, when a friend showed us the Enneagram, that it made sense. And I was starting to then get that clarity. But so I probably wouldn't have quote unquote differentiated or launched myself had I not had the Enneagram, because I would have just kept enmeshing
Yikes,
and
sweetie.
blending.
I'm just
with
thinking,
my
like when we got
family.
married at 20, you were not differentiated from your
I
parents.
wasn't.
No,
And
Right.
mines don't want to be, because it's not, it
that's
doesn't
right.
feel
Oh
safe.
gosh, I can remember just being almost a threat.
Oh, you were. And sometimes you still are.
I love
Because you're
this.
not playing by the family rules, which is good, but it feels
I didn't even
threatening.
know there were rules in there, and I would just
Oh,
go
there are
breaking through it.
lots
There's
and
a
lots
lots of
of
rules,
rules.
lots of rules.
So anyway, that hopefully
Yeah.
that gives you guys
Yeah.
a picture of what it is we're talking about this age range.
Yeah.
So, Amy,
This
tell
is
us
such a
about it.
good, yeah, it's such a good question. And I wish that everyone was asked this question at this stage. And I feel so hopeful for my kids because, as you know, I shared, I'm launching a kid, that those are the kind of conversations we're having ahead of time. And it's like, oh man, our ceiling gets to be their floor. What a beautiful thing. But yeah, I don't think I really did or understood that I needed to, because I was the oldest of four, pastor's kid, an SRP, super responsible person, and I was also my mom's emotional crutch. We had loads of dysfunction, and I don't want to dishonor, but it was a really really tough situation that I was coming from and didn't even have language or understanding. But when I jumped into an internship at a church, we were doing personality things and usually DISC test and Myers Briggs in the late 90s. But I still didn't understand that I could be fully who I was designed to be, because a more assertive, louder, a person, woman in the church, it just, like, who I felt like I wanted to be fully me, wasn't really welcomed or accepted.
Right.
And so it was kind of guising myself, but then at the same time, people mistrusted because I was positive and joyful and and happy, because I just wanted everyone to like me and to be the fun person. And so that was definitely, there was a lot of upheaval in that time. And there really wasn't a grounding, a great resource at that point in my life to help me be comfortable and be able to celebrate who the Lord had created me to be. So yeah, it was definitely a topsy-turvy, and I think it's prolonged some of the healing and growing process, even that I'm still unpacking in my mid-40s. So very grateful that I can at least give this to my kids to just be a little bit clearer and celebrate who they were designed to be to begin with.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Amy, hearing that you grew up in a ministry family. I can remember saying to our kids, hey, your dad is a Presbyterian. That doesn't make you one. You can be whatever you want to be. But just because your dad went to school to be a better one doesn't mean that you can
So
make a
good.
bad decision.
Yeah.
But coaching differentiation in children, one of the very helpful things about the Enneagram is that we are together, but we can be different.
Yeah.
Well, Angie, when I think about rule breakers, you as a young woman, I mean, I remember hearing stories about you in seminary and just making waves everywhere you went. What was it like for you in those early years as a woman?
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, my story's a little bit complicated because, as you guys know, I was adopted as a baby. So I have my family that I grew up in, but then I have a family of origin. So when I think of family, I think of the family I grew up in,
Right.
right? And
Mhm.
I have stories. I mean, I have memories from being very early, very young, where I started kind of detaching or differentiating from my family automatically. Like my mother was verbally abusive to me. I came from a very dysfunctional family. And I can remember some of the things that she would say to me, and I would think, a mother should not say that to a child. It was almost like I could step outside and see
Wow.
it and not, I don't know, it's just so interesting. So I think from a very early age, I started pulling away. And I do think it was a bit of a control thing for me. Um, and so as I got older, but I did grow up in the church. So I totally identify with Amy and what you're saying about being a strong, opinionated woman, that the tradition I grew up in is not highly valued. And so I did try to be, I would say I tried to be a two. I as because I felt like that's exactly the model that would be accepted. And so I really tried to be that. And even into my college years, as I was around other families and got close to other families, I really tried to be that perfect people pleaser. And there was such a rub there for me and my personality. I was unhappy. And I couldn't figure out why I was unhappy trying to be the things that I thought God was telling me to be.
Right.
And so it really wasn't, I did not find the Enneagram in my 20s, but it wasn't really until I met my husband, Robert, who allowed me to be who I wanted to be without me feeling like I had to be a certain way, where I really became more free, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then even detaching from that kind of Enneagram 2 personality that really was not who I was all part of my 20s and my growth at that time.
Mhm. Well, Ro, what about you?
Well, I'm a bit older than all of you, so I'm 66. So I grew up in a very, very different time than even you all did. So what was expected of a woman was pretty clear and in a box. I grew up in a very Italian family. So think of my big fat Greek wedding. So very traditional. And then with a very traditional faith attached to that. We grew up in the Northeast, moved to a very southern small town, and my world was rocked because I never had heard people talk that way and didn't know what a
Hmm.
Baptist was and all those good things. But it led me on a journey to find the Lord in college. And when I did, and I wanted to express that faith in a different way, I was kicked out of my home, leading
Wow.
into my senior year of college. So differentiation was made clear for me.
Yeah.
But I had never, ever, ever, I never disobeyed my parents. This was huge for me because I was not a rebellious kid.
Well,
Probably,
wait, and what's interesting is that the rebellion that you're speaking of is being a Christian in just
yes,
a different way.
yes, it was. I had never, my dad had a very strong personality, kind of told me how to spend my money, what he would pay for me to go to college. And so that was huge.
Yeah.
Probably for me, my attachment, it's very strange. My mom, I see this now, I didn't understand at the time. My mom actually gave mothering over to my sister, who was really just 17 months older than me.
Hmm.
So for me, my journey of differentiation has been from my sister, actually, more than my parents.
Hmm.
And that took me a long time to unpack. Again, so in my 20s, I was deep, deep, deep in the hole of anorexia. I was over exercising, under eating. My health got destroyed. There was no counseling. That wasn't a thing. Anorexia wasn't even known really in the mainstream. So that's a whole story. So
Yeah.
my 20s and 30s, and honestly, it was like you, my husband really provided sacred space for me to heal. Because as a new mom, I was a hot mess. And he grounded our family and grounded me and gave me space to grow. And the Enneagram would have been really helpful to help with a lot of that. I was really leaning into a hard one wing. I can look back now with a lot of internal self-hatred and perfectionism over myself. So
Well,
it's been
Beth,
a long journey to find who I am as a woman.
yeah.
Yeah.
Beth, why don't you start off with asking or answering this question? So you're leaving something, you think of like a biblical model. I remember Allender talking about leaving and cleaving as it relates to loyalties, like leaving family loyalty, um, and cleaving to something else. What is it that as a young mom, now that as a nine, that you really wanted in your family that you would have?
That was different than my
That
parents.
it could have been different, it could have been the same.
Okay. Well, so for me, I really wanted this isn't going to be like a surprise that people that know the Enneagram.
No
Let me give
conflict.
you the stereotype of an egg. Here it is. Here's the definition. But I wanted to have deep, healthy connection with you and my kids at whatever stage of life they were. I wanted them to know that I was their greatest advocate, the champion behind them, the one that would back them up or support them, not judge them. But at the same time, as best I could, provide boundaries, rules, discipline when and where needed. That was like, and so I always try to paint a picture of what I was hoping for them in the future and then taking appropriate steps along the way to get there. Of course, derailing most days, but then trying to get back on track. But that was the ultimate
I'm
goal.
just curious. Well, yeah, we're going to get into that next. Angie, what about you? What did you aspire to, or what did you value that may have been separate, different from family of origin, but also like something that you wanted to create that meant a lot to you?
Well, this might be a little bit surprising to people who have an idea of what eights are. And I think this is one of the reasons that eights are so misunderstood. But I would say probably my top priority in being a mom was to be a nurturer,
Mm-hmm.
like
Sure.
someone who absolutely nurtured and loved and cared for her little chicks,
Mm-hmm.
Um, I never felt that. And so I was definitely missing that in my childhood. And so that comes out in kind of the way of protection for me a lot, which I'm sure is not surprising. But yeah, that nurturing component, I really identify with a lot of what you said as well, Beth. But for sure. And also just having their back, my kids' back, just having it all the
Yeah.
time.
And I love that because with the Enneagram, there's a lot of words, vocabulary, terminology, however you want to say it, that fits into a stereotype for certain people. So, like a lot of times we think of nurture being a 2, but we're all
Yeah.
nurturers. And
Yeah.
so, but what you did was to show I wanted to nurture my kids, but some of the backbone to that was really protecting and providing,
Mm,
which is very eight-ish. Now, of course, I want to protect my kids, but I was just
yeah.
trying to nuance how beautiful that is that
Mm,
as an 8 mom, your gift in nurturing was setting them up well and to protect them, to
mhm.
provide for them, to make sure that they could care for themselves in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and Ro, what about you? So you came from a strong Italian family with a lot of big personality. What did that look like for when you wanted to shape a family?
It's fun. I wanted a quieter home.
Just
A little bit.
quiet.
I looked at my husband and said, whatever your family did, that's what we're doing. But
Mm,
really, it was the connection. I wanted, sounds nine-ish, but in the two-way, I wanted peace. I wanted calm. I
mhm,
wanted family dinners where we sat and had conversations. My husband actually had to teach me how to do that. I wanted it, but I didn't know how to do it. I mean, we were having just before kids, we were having dinner, we'd be finished, and I'd be like scooping up the plates before he was like, well, we're going to sit down and have a conversation. It's like, oh, okay. But I longed for that. I just didn't know how to do it. And
Mhm.
it sounds strange, but he had to model a lot of that for me. But he's a 9 on the Enneagram, so he is a very connected person too. So he could model a lot of that of how to
Mhm.
connect to kids' hearts because
mm,
I never had it,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I wanted peace and I wanted connection and I wanted that deep relationship.
Mm, that's
Now,
beautiful.
this is interesting because Angie, you're married to a 9. And Amy, what's your spouse? Or-
Yep, he's a 9.
Okay. Now, see, this is,
Y'all are just amazing people married to us nine.
We
Maybe
just know
that's
how
why
to
you think
pick
it's
them.
so amazing.
well, yeah, your life is so amazing and you're married to a 9. So I'm going to come back to this, but I want to give Amy a chance to answer the initial question about what is it that what did you value or what was your vision for family? But I also want to come back to the question is how did Mary a 9 help you like in accomplishing your vision for the family? How did they become? Because it sounds like both Angie and Ro, like your spouses, came a place for you to be yourself. Nines are great about creating space for that, even to their own expense. I'll disappear for you to have a personality. But so, Amy, what about you? What did you foresee? What would you value? What shaped your idea of family?
Well, I do fall in the idealist triad, and I have seen that play into my motherhood for sure, especially as I'm grieving the entrance of teenage years and all that that means. Totally surprised me. I can't believe it because I've looked forward, I've looked ahead, I've been so excited for this. But I really wanted to have my kids feel taken care of in a way that I didn't. And alongside of that, taken care of was to have all the experiences, to be the spontaneous, fun loving, we're going to do these things. And if you want a friend over last minute, sure, we'll make that happen. You want a calendar full? Yes, I will fill that calendar. And so I have sometimes I feel like I've created monsters, but at the same time, I love it when they're like, "Mom, thanks for, letting us do all these things," or being spontaneous, or when they name that quality. It makes me feel so happy, and I do constantly ask, "Do you feel like am I taking care of you?" And so in my mistyping and all that whole process, it's just really funny that I've actually it makes so much sense as I look through my motherhood, maybe even more, more clearly than anything else in life.
So back to the spouse question about marrying
Are you going
nines.
to answer this too?
No, no, I'm the interviewer. But why do you think you gravitated to a nine?
I met my husband when I was 15. And my counselor, after she poked a lot of holes in making sure I wasn't covering up for not a good man, she really looked at me and said, I wouldn't say this, but you were rescued at 15. And
Okay.
the trajectory I would have been on. So he's pretty wholehearted guy. But I think that ability for a nine to hold space without judgment. He
Mhm.
held space for me when I was in places most people wouldn't have held space.
Wow.
All like through high school, through college. When I would cry at night and tell him I was the worst mother ever in the world and I shouldn't be a mom and all those things, he held me. He held space. He encouraged me. Um, that's the gift nines bring.
Yeah.
And when they're healthy and they're not totally losing themselves, he didn't lose himself. He could hold who
Yeah.
he was, his autonomy, why he could hold that space for me. And that's pretty rare. And
Yeah.
it's a gift.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Angie, what about you as an
I
eight?
think, I think for me, Robert, it really his confidence in who he was and his gifting and what he was called to, and not ever feeling threatened by me, but actually enjoying the fact that I had opinions and that I was weird and silly and but not acting like I was a weirdo. I think that was part of it. I think also his just his calming presence. I mean, that's so so nine. But I mean, he really is. He leads the music team at our church, and I'm telling you, to be the leader of creatives and be a calming presence is just the best gift in the world for the people he leads, and it is for our family too. I mean, the calming presence when I'm all up, hot and bothered is it's a real gift.
Hot and
It really
bothered.
is.
I've not
Hot
heard
and
that in a
bothered.
long time.
Amy, what about you?
Yeah, well, we're 20 years in. And so maybe the things that attracted him to me then, like now, sort of irritate him because, because I'm fully who the Lord put in my heart now. I'm healed, I'm doing good. But I think that whole element of bringing stability and calm to my anxiety of a 7. And then I was trying to get probably as opposite as I could. And my dad is a 7. And that's there's a lot of pain and dysfunction there. And so I really wanted opposite of that. And even why it's been hard to grasp that there is a similar personality in me. And so just having that anchor of being very, very different and very reliable. And even though like those things eventually midway through kind of drive you crazy, because I'm like, let's change. And he's like, no, we're staying, and we're staying for another 20 years. But that's why I loved him, because I didn't know that. I had never experienced it. So very, very grateful to that. Like, it's sometimes extreme and sometimes opposite. And so grateful for the grounding steadiness that his 9 offers.
Can I give a quick analogy? Maybe
Sure.
when people are married to 9s and those of us have bigger personalities, it was like my husband and I said, like, I was a kite and he was an anchor. And he kept me from flying out in the wild blue yonders. But I also helped him not stay stuck.
Amen on that one.
So I
That is
think
so much
Beth
better.
loves it that
I love and hate that Jeff helps me not to stay stuck. Everything in me wants, because it's inertia, right? What's in motion stays in motion, and what's not in motion's not going to move. And when we are stuck, we can actually think we're cozy and comfy in our stuckness. Like, no, I'm good. We're fine. But I also know that that's not good. And so he definitely helps me, whether I like it sometimes or not, to get out of the inertia problem that I'm in.
So the analogy for Robert and I say often is, I am an unstoppable force and meeting an immovable object. That is the 8 and the 9 inertia. I think the kite and the anchor is much better.
Well, and I always tell people, us 9s are the most stubborn on the Enneagram. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times people don't realize that
100%.
until they're close to a 9, because 9s, we're pretty flexible most of the time. But when we're not flexible, we are unmovable.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, each of you have what sounds like hurtful, dysfunctional families of origin. And then there's something about God's providence that all of the strategies that we then cultivate and bring to our family to try to bring our own healing, he sort of frustrates, because people are going to frustrate those efforts. And the years of motherhood, like you set this ideal vision of what you want family to be, life, your children's personalities, disagreements with spouse, all kinds of things, maybe even your family of origin, kind of come back at you and are fighting you against these values. I'd love to hear what has your experience been, that although you set out on this path to create this family that you've always longed for, and then when life didn't cooperate with you, how did you respond to the tension of staying present, but maybe reevaluating, what is it that I really wanted? And how can I still maintain my values that I have for my family? But think of it through the lens of your type.
I think for me, I think we talked about this, and I can almost remember where we were talking about it, but I think I was like, living out the fruits of the Spirit was way easier when I was single and didn't have children.
You are the most kindest, loving person
To
ever.
myself.
So patient.
I was kind to myself, patient with myself, but these people thwarted it, and it's like, no, actually what's in your heart is now just really coming out. So, I think for me, when my ideals of what the family I wanted to be weren't happening, I took that internal and shamed and harmed myself to then become this person I thought I should be, which that doesn't, when you say it out loud, it's like, well, how is harming or hurting yourself internally going to help you to become that ideal mom? But that's how, we can think. And
Yeah, I learned in seminary, grace works, but shame works faster.
well, you think it does. It just harms more. So so I think for a long time I played into that mode, but while keeping the ideal in mind. So I think, definitely I had moments of growth and like, really was imparting great things to the kids, but I would say I did a lot of it under the guise of fear and like the fear of abandonment of the family, meaning not that you guys would actually leave, but that there would be an abandonment of connection or abandonment of love or abandonment that I would have self-worth.
A lot of people say the phrase in their head, "I'm not enough."
Yeah.
For you, what do you think? How would you define that more specifically as I'm not enough?
Yeah. So in my world, it was base at the root, it was if anyone's not happy in some form or fashion, I am not enough. So if the kids are whining or they're upset or they're dissatisfied or
Yeah.
grumpy or you name it, it just said to my 9 heart, see, you're not enough. You're not being a good mom. Even though logically I knew that, let's say in the moment I was doing the right healthy thing, everything internally was saying, you're being a bad mom right now because now look at they're upset or whatever it is. And so that's where I would trip up as a 9.
Well, Ro, let's start with you. Whenever life started pushing back on trying to create this new family, how did you respond to it?
Well, my because of what I was doing to my body, after the birth of my third child, my body said, "No more, I'm done."
Mhm.
And I was diagnosed with lupus, autoimmune disease.
Mm.
So this ideal mom that I was going to be, where I was going to make the memories, and I was trying to do everything in a very short amount of time that my parents didn't do for me.
Yep.
And so when I think about also a message that was sent to me when I was young, it was about being selfish. And so as a 2, any thought for yourself is selfish. So now I am chronically ill.
Mm-hmm.
I some days barely could get out of bed. So talk about that negative self-worth. I'm a selfish mom. I'm a bad mom because I wasn't doing for my kids. And so those were hard years. But probably what I got through out of that was my self-worth and who I was could not be attached to what I did because
Sure.
I couldn't do it. I mean, the idolatry of the mother I wanted my kids to worship. I mean, I was going hard after that was just crumbled. And I remember thinking they think mom is somebody lays on the couch. And if you talk to those older 3, I think they think I'm making it up because they go, I don't remember you like that. But in your mind, the enemy's there to say, that's all they're going to remember. That's all they're going to remember. So life just crashed hard on me. And
Yeah.
so I physically, emotionally, spiritually, I couldn't do it. And it was like God that's when my healing process started, actually, is
Yeah.
when my body just shut down on me.
Yes. Well, Amy, let's go to you. How did you respond when life pushed back?
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of it was we didn't think we could maybe have our own kids, and then we had 3 and 3.5 years, and within that had job loss. We moved to another state without any family, and I kind of found myself with 3 little kids, exhausted. We financially were really strapped and had started over in our early 30s, and it was like, talk about limitations. And limitations was a dirty word. And
Right.
not, yes, and not being able to have the energy or the availability or the opportunity. And we also just didn't even have community in those early days. So I feel like that was it was a deep layer of healing, but also coming to Jesus, where there, you know, you have those marker moments. And that was a coming to the end of myself, the bottom of the U moment. And the only way out was the Lord. And so coming to that, and I think rediscovering who I was apart from a role, you know, we talk about that, right? In our 20s, we establish some of that identity, and it could be all the volunteer, the kind of friend I was, the kind of, you know, role that I had in relationships, even in family. And I was always fearful that my kids would remember my hypercritical moments of myself and of them, when
Mm-hmm.
when anger that was so not my MO, but the frustration would come out sideways because I was trying so hard to be positive and have fun and pretend like everything was okay. And then those sideways moments, you know, I absolutely apologized a lot to the kids when they were little, and I didn't even know what to do about it. I
Yeah.
just felt alone and going, who is this and how am I this way? And this is the opposite of how I want to be. This is not my idea of an ideal mom at all. Um, and I like, it's just so powerful again, to, even though it happened later, to have some language around why that time was so hard and so refining and frustrating. It's even been really beautiful to have conversations now, which again, kind of like you said, Ro, when I talk about those moments, like I can remember some key moments like potty training moments or whatever, and they're like, what are you talking about? I
Yes.
got so angry, and then I was angry at myself because I was not being the calm, cool, fun mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
So certainly refining years. And I think that's what motherhood really is. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the total dying of to yourself and all those things. And by the grace of God, some of us get to find ourselves and rediscover ourselves in a more beautiful way.
And I would say, and you alluded to this, and repairing, right?
Oh,
Mm.
Because
yes.
I mean, Jeff knows that apologizing hasn't been my like easiest skill set, but I have
Yeah.
gotten better over the years. But when I do acknowledge, you know, where I've had a shortcoming, I've been hurtful, whatever it is, admitted it and apologized and, you know, asked them, you know, how I could like mend or repair, it means so much to them. And that's the beautiful thing, I think, of having kids. Like, I'm not saying they're always going to forgive of all things, but kids are usually pretty quick to um, forgive when apologies are done well and
Mhm.
in the right way. And that, but I would say so because we're all going to make mistakes, all of us. I don't care what type you
Mhm.
are, we're going to make mistakes. But if we can own it and restore that relationship, that's really where it can mend.
Now,
Amen.
Angie, you've never faced a problem that you can't get through. So, like, you just handle it with strength and dignity and just
Mm-mm.
composure.
Yeah, I
You were the
wish.
excellent mom.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, it's so funny, Amy, because I have such a similar connection to your story. We moved to a new city in 2009. My kids were third grade, first grade, and pre-K. And we moved to Orlando, you know, the happiest place on earth. And I was really excited about it when we moved here with little kids, getting to raise your kids in Orlando. I mean, it sounds like a dream. But we also found ourselves really financially strapped. And we cannot underestimate the pressure that that puts on all members of the family, but especially the parents.
Yeah.
And living under that pressure, but also having very young children, I also have memories of angry outbursts. I can remember even prior to that, before we moved, when I was potty training my oldest child. It's so funny that you mentioned potty training. When I was potty training my oldest child, I remember one specific incident where I got so angry. I was not violent, but I yelled for sure. And I remember praying afterwards, God, please don't let him remember this. Please wipe this from his memory. Anyway, but it's so funny how that really does bring out the emotion in us. But those years were so hard for me, and I think I really had this underlying anger the whole time, and probably didn't even realize it until years later when I found the Enneagram and I found out I was a type 8, and I thought, I'm not an angry person. And then I started remembering all these moments and started noticing how uncomfortable I was with my kids' anger. So they would get angry, and I would think, what is this feeling? Like, why do I hate that so bad? And I realized it was because I wasn't even comfortable with my own anger. And so yeah, I would say even just stopping to feel the feelings or letting them feel those feelings was something I did not do when they were younger that I wish I could redo. But, even now that I'm parenting mostly adult children, learning to just listen and hold them in their feelings and hold space for them, has been a growth point for me.
Yeah.
So we talked through a lot of heavy, difficult stuff, but the hero's journey is that whenever they reach this critical point, they realize that, oh, wait a minute, there's another gift that I have that gets me through it. So I'd love to hear from each of you. What did you discover was the real gift that you had to give to your kids?
Hmm.
You come to your end, like I've just proven my greatest fear. And yet, the great quote is, the cave you
Mm.
fear holds the treasure you seek. What was the gift that you found that you actually have to contribute to the kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as you said it, the first thing that came to mind, and being in the gut triad, I will speak to it, was my assertive leadership in starting your Enneagram
So
coach.
it was not
Mhm.
your people pleasing.
It wasn't my people pleasing. It
Nope.
wasn't accommodating. It was, this is who I am, and I'm going to move into it.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, what about you?
Yeah, when it was kind of specifically a little bit before the third one was born, but it was summer, our first year in Missouri. It was 2010, and I had the two other little girls. And it was some of those, it was potty training too, but that coming to the end of myself led me to embrace the present, to where, someone who was always looking ahead and wanting our options and wanting everything excited, to like let myself be stuck and to enjoy the fact that I was stuck with them, and and being able to see how precious this present moment was. And of course, learning to make it fun for all it was worth.
Yeah, right.
Finding all the watering holes in Kansas City, because what do you do? But like that really changed. I remember stepping into what I would call intentional parenting in a way that I have no regrets over, and it changed the trajectory of my parenting for sure.
I love
Mm.
that.
Angie, what was your gift?
Yeah. So, the anger that I spoke of, I think a lot of that also came from feeling controlled by my children because they were so dependent on me. And
Yeah.
I would find myself in angry situations when they couldn't tie their shoe yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need to be able to do this. Or when my daughter has really curly hair and she refused to learn how to do her hair. And so I was forced to either let her just go with her hair undone or do it. And then as she became a middle schooler and really got more self-conscious about how she looked, but still wouldn't do her hair, it was like a burden on me. I have to do her hair. I literally have to do it. And I felt so controlled by that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned is because I would push my kids to be more independent, they really learned to fly in ways
Hmm.
that I would have never dreamed that they would learn to fly. My husband loves to tell this story that all my kids are musicians, and my oldest especially is a keyboard player, and they had auditions for chapel band at school, and my husband is a extremely talented piano player. So for him, being ready for something means something totally different than it does for me when it comes to piano. And so what my son was in the 7th grade, and I was like, "Well, you're gonna audition, right, to be in the chapel band?" And my husband went, "Oh my gosh, he's not ready for that. He is not ready." And I said, "Can you play 1? Can you play 4? Can you play 5? You're ready." And so because I pushed that, he
Sure.
went and auditioned. Of course, that's what he's doing now. But my husband loves to tell that story because Robert, as a 9, was like, "He's not ready. He needs more
Yeah.
time. He's got it." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh no, he's ready. Let him fly. Let him fly."
Let them fly.
So
Oh, that's great.
yeah, yeah.
Ro?
I think for so long, I couldn't have named any positive mother
Mhm.
skills. I was in such a negative hole. At one point, one of my sons told me, quit telling us what a horrible mother you were. And so for me, I think my kids, again, had 3 very close together, miscarriages, health crash, had 2 later in life in my late 30s. And I homeschooled through all that. I think what my children would say, I modeled for them. And what I found was a tenacity in me. I think when they talk to me now, they saw me overcome a lot because I just didn't have a foundation. I was coming from a pretty deep hole. And I think now the perseverance and the pushing through and the grace that they have given me, the grace God has given me. And I now can turn to young moms and saying, I'm telling you, He can repair it all. For as bad as you think at those moments, and talking about learning, I had to learn to tell my kids, I'm sorry. It was not modeled for me. And I remember the first time I felt the Lord whisper that to me. And I was like, no, you don't. I'm the boss. You don't apologize. And I remember I went and said, well, I'm sorry I lost my temper. Again, like you, I didn't even know I had any anger until my daughter turned 3 because I'd stuffed it all. My family was explosive. And when I was in 7th grade, I grit my teeth and I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. So I flatlined my emotions until my Enneagram 8 3-year-old started inserting her independence on me. And all of a sudden this monster showed up. But in that, learning to say I was sorry and to say, but if you wouldn't have that God said, quit being a butt and drop it. And then, but I had to learn I ruptured so much, but I did learn to repair. And I think, Beth, you said it. I think kids, when they know, I don't think there's any phase in life harder than your 30s to about mid 40s. I think that's the hardest there is because dads are working, moms are working, kids are, every decision feels like it weighs 100 pounds. And every decision you think is going to mortally wound your children forever. And I think it's so, so hard. And I'm just here to say, God will get you through. Because if He could get me and my family through, He can get anybody through.
Yeah.
Well, the last season I'd like to focus on, I like to think of it, the metaphor that Beth and I use is it's like a rocket taking off. So for years, we've built a launch pad in this beautiful rocket, and then eventually they get to take off. It takes a lot of fuel for them to get out of our atmosphere. And it burns up the launch pad on the way up.
Yeah.
And that the way that happens, it could be just styles of living, preferences of faith, values, behaviors. There's all kinds of ways that they will distance and kind of draw new boundaries that reshape the family. A friend in seminary thought of families as people on an inner tube in the water. Everybody has a place, and everybody has to adjust to everyone else on the inner tube. And now someone's moving. They might, as Ro mentioned earlier, they may bring spouses onto
And
that
they
inner
jump on the
tube,
inner
and they
tube.
jump on, and they cause a disruption of the whole family.
Yeah, everyone's got to adjust.
Everyone's got to adjust. So I'd love to hear. So, Beth and Ro, you're both grandparents now, grandmothers. And then, Amy and Angie, you've got teenage children who are finding their voice and kind of setting a path now. So I'd love to hear, how do you relate to this new relationship of you're still a parent, but also you're becoming a peer?
Yeah.
Mm.
I think for me, it's really exciting, but it's also really scary because, my ideal is that we'd have this great connection and nothing's ever wrong. And, looking at my own story and how, like the very beginning of our conversation today, and how we needed to differentiate from our parents and look at where they were harmful, or they missed it, or they tried, but they just didn't get it, that they had strengths, but they also had weaknesses. And just naming all of that, for my parents, I kind of, was like, ooh, that's going to be our kids. but but then learning how to welcome that and encourage it is super scary, but it's also really healing, redemptive, and it also enables a stronger uh, connection with my kids. So what I actually fear, which would be, let's not talk about anything negative. There's nothing wrong here, people. Like, we had the best family. That actually is going to weaken the relationship and harm the relationship. So I often try to ask my kids, um, about stories of the past, or how did they feel? How did we miss something? Like, what did we miss? How was that harmful to them? What do they want us to know? How can I apologize? Okay, you don't really know, that's fine, but think about it, because we did hurt you. And
Yeah.
so you're going to need a process, and let us know, because we do want to repair and move forward. And it's always, you never know, because they're going to have an epiphanies between now and till whenever, they're 80 years old. Well, we won't be around then, um but always inviting them to share that with us. And I think when
Mhm.
we have that kind of posture, then they can come to us with a sense of um, maybe humility, but also tenderness. Versus, I think when parents are not open to it, their kids have to come in a lot more harsh or disruptive. And so we've had some really good, hard conversations over many years, and sadly hear things that we didn't know that hurt or harm them.
Yeah, as a six who's always trying to prepare for inept or situations, they still surprise me by the stuff they bring up. Like, "Oh, that was hurtful to you? Like, what about the top 5 that I've got rolling around in my head?"
Yeah. And so, for me, I want the legacy to be that we hold the position of being humble mentor friends that walk
Mhm.
alongside them now, who are willing to listen and own what's ours, even if we didn't
Mhm.
even mean to. Like, sometimes I'm giving the best of who I am, and it totally landed on them a different way. And that's okay. Like, I can say, wow, I really was giving you lessons in empathy and compassion. And you took it, like my son being a 6, you took it that you have to be ultra loyal to a point that it was harmful. Like, oh man, I'm so sorry that that landed on you that way. So it's just such a mixed bag of everything. But I think that's the legacy I'm hoping to pass on.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
Ro, you multiplied, and so you have a lot of opportunities for growth.
So many opportunities, more than I could have ever dreamt. Beth, I think you're so right. And honestly, this is probably, I'll try to keep, this is my passion, because I am seeing so many people in this stage of life not, it's not going well. They're not
Yeah.
doing well, especially moms are not releasing well. That topography of the family, when that first one walks out the door, it's like an earthquake, and it changes
Mhm.
the topography forever. It is never coming back. And we can know that in our head and go, oh, this is really good. But there is something else that's going on in our heart. And so I really, like you, Beth, we welcomed our kids to come back and say anything they needed to say, because
Mhm.
it is not worth it to me for them to carry baggage, all the baggage that I had to carry, into their future.
Yeah.
And so we said, look honestly at how you were raised. We did some things good, and the things that you want to carry into your family, carry them. The others, leave it behind. You're not loyal. We have to speak that freedom. You were talking about Dan Allender and the leaving and cleaving. I don't think we get as gritty with newlyweds of what that actually means, of how they really do need to leave the family of origin. Um, it's hard when your kids come back, and we've had some kids. Our couple kids came back guns a blazing, and we were a little bit surprised. But if you can hold steady, why they do, I'm telling you, the connection the healing, the relationship will far exceed what you had before they did it. If you need to go to counseling with we went to counseling with one of our kids when she went to college. She struggled really a lot. A lot came out, and we were willing to go to counseling with her. I think this is where the Enneagram work at this age for women and men, but for moms, put your oxygen mask on first. Do your work. So my need to be loved is not attached to my children needing me and wanting me. And if I still had that at play, they couldn't come back and be honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever your number, whatever that core fear is, let Jesus heal it. So your kids can detach and you detach from them.
Mm-hmm.
And God was very merciful because my firstborn's an 8. And she's been married now 16 years. And I could go into all the stories when she first got married, but choose like boundaries. What's a boundary? And she lives boundaried. She's one of the most boundaried, and I'm saying that in a positive way, a boundaried person I know. God was merciful to give me that firstborn. It didn't feel good at times, but it helped me understand my boundaries. And again, the Enneagram showed up all at this time. And I think it saved my relationship with my daughter-in-laws. I think dear mamas. I love my daughter-in-laws. They are awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, and the sibling relationships, daughter-in-laws to sister-in-laws now, it's so many dynamics. And I don't mean to scare y'all to still have teenagers at home because we think that's the scariest part.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still in the center.
Yep.
You're still there. You can navigate and you can pull people together. When adults start splitting, which I've seen in friendships, start splitting, parents have to be Switzerland.
Yep.
We unless those adult children invite us in, we will do way more harm.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about scary not being in control.
Yeah.
And so it is Enneagram work at this stage of life is
Crucial. Yeah.
It is so crucial. And
I agree 100%. It is beautiful to use when they're adults. Absolutely beautiful because you can have the language to talk because they're older now.
Yes.
But you're right. The stage is pretty scary. One thing I want to come back to that came to my mind when you guys talked about Dan Allender and what you were saying. I love that book that he wrote, How Children Raise Parents. And it's true. Like, I feel like what I'm hearing from you, that God gifting you a type 8 daughter really was a gift to help you learn and to grow from her. And I just think we all get to learn from our kids. We get to be curious, walk alongside as parents still, but walk alongside and encourage them.
Well, Amy, what about you? How do you navigate these teen years as a 7 mom?
And almost like empty nester.
I know. Well, on my knees a lot because it just is always really nice when parents who are little head say, oh, that where the stage you're in now is truly the hardest. So that brings some relief. But the things that stick out to me is when we do have kids in counseling because it's just a good idea now. And then we recently saw Inside Out 2. And for those who've seen it, you'll know. And then if you go see it, I highly recommend it. But they have little islands in the mind, and come teenage years, the friend island is ginormous and the family island is teeny tiny. Mm-hmm. And so wrapping your mind around that reality is tough because that is the transition of whether, no matter your personality, style, and communication and all of that, it's the reality of you are taking a little bit more of a back seat. You're still there. You're always going to be present, but you're not in the driver's seat by any means. And you're not even the passenger seat a lot of times. So, and the other thing for me, just and very brief, is that I'm coming to grips with the fact that this is just a sad season. And as a 7, oh my gosh, like so painful. But I am trying to remind myself that it's okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be mourning. It's okay to miss the old days. It's okay to also go, oh, I looked forward to this, but it's not quite like what I thought it was going to be. And so I have a 7-8-3 as far as types, so all assertive, and I'm just trying to navigate that, not controlling, knowing you need plenty of options and yet be taken care of. Success matters, not as much of the fun, and just trying to do that dance, that's a good point, Ro, that I can do now.
Yeah.
And do between them. And then I'm really going to have to just like, whoop, let it go. I'm here to love you. I'm here to say I'm sorry. And hopefully create a space that you want to come back to for holidays, right?
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Angie?
So I will say one of the things that surprised me the most about that my kids encountered when they went to college, it was just something I'd not thought about, was how when my oldest started making friends, and of course they sit around and talk about their families and what their home life was like, that my son would come back to me and say, I had it so good and I had no idea. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
guys, it's awesome. And my youngest, who's now a freshman at UCF, same thing. He's getting the same thing. Now, my middle daughter, she does school online. So she hasn't quite had the experience they have, like going out and meeting friends, but and hearing that. But it's been awesome. And we were actually talking about this just the other night. And my oldest reminded me of that. And I said, well, it was Father's Day. So we were like going around the table telling my husband how awesome he is. And my oldest reminded me of how grateful he is just that he grew up in our family the way he did. And I said, I just need you to know that one day you're going to know it wasn't as perfect as you may think it was right now. And he's like, I don't understand that. And I said, you're going to have kids and then you're going to understand. But it's almost like me apologizing in advance. Like you're going
Yeah.
to realize we did some things wrong one
Yeah.
day. But yeah, so that's encouraging for me, Ro, to hear you on that end of it. And
Mhm.
I cannot even imagine the dynamics of all of the different people coming into the family. I mean, we're just navigating dating people outside of the family and what that's like. And man, it's a whole thing.
It is a whole thing.
It's
But I would say the Enneagram just makes it, I don't know, easier is not the right word. It gives
It,
you a roadmap
yes, that's
because, like,
exactly it.
when a son-in-law comes into the picture,
Yeah.
and if you're blessed enough to know their Enneagram type, if they're willing, it really gives you insights to see it through their eyes, to speak their language, to love and care and support them the way that they would resonate and understand it. And so that you do become that safe place that, I mean, maybe not all in-laws would want to do this. I, as a 9, can't imagine why not. Um, but I feel like that has been one of the greatest gifts for us with our son-in-law. Now he's a type 9, so it's like, oh, I get you. But it's been really fun to encourage him to be himself, to name things that are in his life that maybe have never been named, and just to kind of watch him grow and blossom. That has been absolutely life-giving. And, and then with my daughter, having in-laws, for her to know, oh, this is their type and this is what's going on, and to be able to process that with more clarity versus like assuming they're doing it because I would have done it such and such way. So now I'm all hurt, and
Yeah.
to give people the benefit of the doubt. So I think the Enneagram just it's always giving, time and time again. And so, with the book Enneagram for Moms, I know that it probably lands on people maybe when they hear the word as, oh, this is for younger moms. And I think like what we're all saying is, no,
Yeah.
this is a lifetime work. You're always going to be a mom. And to do your own work will be the blessing that you actually give your children. Any other questions you had for us, Jeff?
No, I think that's all.
Great.
You
Well,
ladies are awesome.
yeah, you guys thank you so much. It's been, I mean, knowing you guys for years, also watching your kiddos like grow and you guys grow has just been such a delight, such a gift for me, which is why I wanted to have you guys on, because I mean, I've just heard your stories, know the different kind of ups and downs you've gone through. So thanks for coming on and just being vulnerable with the type that you are, the Enneagram type that you are, the stage of life you're in, and what God is doing. So thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for
Thank
having us.
you. Thanks for having us.
Well, I hope that you guys really enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I really enjoyed listening to all four of us talking about the different stages of life from the different Enneagram types and what we've learned along the way. I hope it's been a real blessing for you. And in fact, if you're interested in learning how to use the Enneagram in parenthood, uh, definitely go pick up my new book, Enneagram for Moms. And you can get that at enneagramformoms.com. And we've got some, goodies there, free goodies, some downloads that you can get to help you as you navigate parenthood. And yes, I know it says Enneagram for Moms, but hey, dads, not only can you learn about yourself, because the Enneagram does speak to any gender, but you'll also get to know some inside scoop on the moms and how they're functioning, or maybe what they might need from you. So go ahead, grab the book Enneagram for Moms, and then join us next week, because I'm going to start a whole new series that I think you're going to be really interested in. It's on the instinctual subtypes. So we'll see you then.